Hey everyone, welcome back to Boards and Chords. Pull up a chair, we saved a seat for you. Come on in. Today we're going to talk about the board game Fallout. And you know what, I admit it. Ports of video games or movies to board games make me skeptical. Much of the time they seem like half-hearted or half-thought-through attempts to rebrand some existing game to squeeze a few more bucks out of the fans of the license. Honestly, if you come into a video to board game port expecting the video game experience, you're sure to be disappointed. But if you come in with an open approach to these games on their own merits, sometimes you can expose a real jewel, and I think that the Fallout board game shines among the bright ones. The Fallout board game does attempt to recreate the open world, go anywhere, do anything mechanics of the video game, but of course within the necessary confines of a board game. Without creating a full-on pen and paper RPG, this sort of sandbox game will face limitations, and the Fallout board game does so as well. When we set up the game, the players first choose among the 5 characters to play: the Wastelander, the Vault Dweller, the Brotherhood of Steel Outcast, the Super Mutant, and the Ghoul. Each of them have starting gameplay benefits and stats. The players then set out their character boards before them, along with any starting equipment they may have and their starting special stats. These stats, as in the video game, represent proficiency in strength, perception, charisma, intelligence, agility, luck, and endurance. While in the video game, these stats have a numerical value that increases or decreases throughout the game. For the board game, either you have them or you don't. The special stats assist in succeeding adventure skill checks, eligibility to use certain items, and more readily surviving combat encounters. Then a scenario is selected from among 6 options, representing areas and stories appearing in the various Bethesda Fallout iterations. Each scenario defines a layout of board game tiles which is set out in the play area for that game. 4 static and known tiles are specified, as well as all the available mystery tiles, of which some are marked as dangerous, and others as merely unknown. These dangerous and unknown tiles remain unexplored until the players uncover them during their turns. This main scenario outlines a conflict between 2 major factions in the area, and a series of quest cards will be revealed as the game progresses and the player makes choices, advancing the agendas and strength of one side or the other. And then the adventure begins. Each player takes a turn during which he may take 2 actions: move, explore, encounter, fight, quest, or camp. The players reveal the map as they move and explore by flipping an adjacent tile, and encounter various settlements, ruins, and vaults. The main quest, as well as side quests, are advanced as the player makes choices, take actions, reaping rewards such as money, influence, items, and experience. As the player's experience points increase, they gain levels represented and rewarded by adding another letter and therefore proficiency to their special stats. And after each player takes a turn, the enemy activation turn occurs, in which certain random creatures on the board advance toward the nearest player, attacking them if they get too close. The game ends as soon as any player reaches the designated amount of influence, which differs depending on the number of players. That player wins, and other players reveal their influence amounts and modifiers if it will allow them to share victory as well. The game also can come to an end if one of the factions reach the maximum power level on the scenario tracker. In this case, that faction gathers enough power to control all the wasteland, and all the players will have lost at that point. Let's talk about the components for a minute. Fantasy Flight has produced many board games, and they regularly claim recognition as having great components, and Fallout does not disappoint in this regard. The box, the tiles, the rule book, the weathered art style on many of the pieces, they all effectively evoke the feel of the Fallout world. The player character miniatures, while they're unpainted, look great and have a satisfying amount of detail to them, making the pieces easily recognizable for the character that they portray. The Fallout board game comes with a lot of components. Map tiles, a couple of hundred cards, special tokens, enemy tokens, money tokens, dice, and more. There's a lot to this game. Each piece and card is easily distinguishable from the others and identifiable to its purpose. The pieces are standard and sturdy in construction, and they're pleasing to look at, greatly reinforcing the theme of the game. One thing to warn you about those, the player boards, the special boards, they require some assembly before the first playthrough. And while I love the finished product, I was a bit nervous about putting them together, as insertion and joining of the connector pieces proved difficult for both fitting through the holes in the cardboard pieces as well as snapping the connecting pieces together. I had a real concern about damaging those player boards until I got out some tools to assist me in that. I used like a hammer and some pliers on a hard surface to force those in without bending the cardboard or otherwise damaging the boards. Let's talk about storage for a minute. In any large board game, storage and organization of components can make a big difference in the amount of time it takes to set up, clean up, and play. That setup and cleanup time may not be significant to some, but for us as a busy family, shaving off 10 minutes before and after a game can frequently make the difference of whether or not we choose to play it on a given game night. It is for that reason that we give a lot of thought and sometimes money to the organization systems of games with lots of pieces. What we often do, and what we've done so far with Fallout, is to separate out the pieces in what seems to be a logical order when we punch out the pieces initially. But then after we finish our first game, we'll adjust it when we clean up and sort it in a different way. Often some pieces will make more intuitive sense to bag together after we played it than they might have before when we're not really sure what they do. Then you can sort them into the right size bags or other custom storage solution that you may have. By the way, you do have a bag of bags, right? Make sure you never throw out small bags from a game, even if you don't think you'll need it. Some other game that you'll have will need storage of just that size, and a sandwich bag may be too big or too small to adequately do the job of storing it. Let's talk about our experiences as a family playing this game. Attempting to bring the Fallout video game series and experience to a board game table couldn't have been anything but a massive and gutsy undertaking. Attempting to simulate the non-linear nature of questing and exploration that one expects from the Fallout world must have been quite the challenge. But I like the way they implemented it. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to replicate all of the choices and open exploration, but each game still provides a variety of choices. The randomized placement of the tiles and associated obstacles and travel paths make for a different terrain layout each game, and the branching quest lines of the main and side quests make for a great set of stories that unfold as you play the game. Some of the side quests do begin to look familiar and outcomes remembered as players go through subsequent games. But so far for us, we haven't become bored with the minor overlap that we've encountered. One of the issues that I have discovered while playing the video game of Fallout is deciding when the game is done. being a non-linear game, even when the main storyline comes to an end, many fascinating side quests may still lie unresolved, and there may be more that I want to explore or build, and so on. With the board game, some definite ending must be in sight. So we have to have winning conditions established for this game. So in the board game, then, one player amasses enough influence to claim victory, and of course, everyone loses if a major faction reaches a high enough power. I feel kind of dissatisfied with this influence system, though. Honestly, I'm not sure what would have been a better way to do this. However, some cutoff is needed if the board game isn't to last 100 hours like the video game. But perhaps it would feel more complete if it ended with the final choices of a main quest line rather than the abrupt ending attaining some arbitrary number of influence points. But of course, then how would you choose who the winner of the game is or not? Maybe you would just have everybody be the winner, and having gone through the experience was the point of the game rather than a particular winner or loser. I don't know. That might not work though. But the influence system that they did settle on feels a little odd to me. Also, though, while I do like the way that the quest system is implemented through the quest cards, any action that any player does may advance a quest. This can potentially cause story dissatisfaction in the group, as a player who can conveniently reach an objective may grab a reward and derail the momentum of that the other players have been building on toward a certain end. And while I understand this from a competitive gameplay side, the story lover in me gets disappointed when this happens. So I'd like to see some kind of way of maybe locking a particular storyline to a person. Again, maybe this would just require far too many components and gameplay time than would be practical for a game like this. It's not a 100-hour video game again. But still, as we've played it in our family, we've consistently enjoyed the benefits and drawbacks of our chosen characters, the choices and rewards of different quests and encounters, and the unique leveling system that the special stats offer. The mechanics of this game feel fresh and unusual, and the semi-cooperative nature is fun as we work together yet pursue our own victory. I hope and expect that Fantasy Flight will develop future expansions for Fallout board game, which will expand the quests and scenarios for even more varied replayability. Another thing that Fantasy Flight has become known for is their complex and fiddly rules, and Fallout honestly proves to be no exception to this. It's not that bad, and while it's not the biggest or most difficult rulebook, the Fallout game mechanics and turn sequence take some learning. In preparation for our first game, I read the rulebook and then watched a video of a gameplay on YouTube. This made our game for the first time go much more smoothly. And then after a couple of player turns, we were all moving and playing with confidence, and with only 2 actions per turn, the turns themselves usually move on very quickly once the options are understood. This is great for family gamers, since long periods of boredom and inactivity between turns for each of the players can easily and often result in the younger players, especially, to be turned off to the game and maybe even to board gaming in general. At least that's been our family experience. Often in board gaming, family harmony and good sportsmanship are easier to maintain when the game is cooperative rather than competitive. This is often because of the age and development and developmental differences in the players that likely aren't present whenever you have a group of teenagers or adults playing together. The Fallout board game, as mentioned above, is semi-cooperative, such that the players can work together on common goals while at the same time being competitive, in that ultimately there will almost certainly be one winner. This, of course, appeals to the more cutthroat players at the table. In a similar vein, I appreciate that player elimination, while it is present, comes rarely, and it's rather difficult to accomplish, honestly. When a player has spent several hours invested in a game, dying and being removed from that game can be very frustrating, even for adults, and especially so for younger players. Dying in Fallout comes with some consequences, but they're really rather mild. Let's talk about the content a little bit of the game itself. The content of the video game for Fallout causes me quite a bit of concern for my kids. However, the nature of the Fallout board game changes things in this area quite significantly. Gone are the jump scare, in-your-face monster attacks and dark subway tunnels. There's no voiceover profanity of random NPCs cursing at me and my kids, although there is on some of the quest cards, some swear words printed on them. But there's no heads and other body parts exploding and graphically in front of our eyes during combat, like in the video game. Much of the M-rated content and material from the video game is absent from the board game. While the quest descriptions and dialogue often do concern sometimes dark and desperate survival situations that is inherent to Fallout, such as slavery, crime, and drug use, the writers describe them in ways that shouldn't be too bothersome to young players. You as a parent must make your own decisions about that, but you might be satisfied playing this game with your young kids if you just take a Sharpie and block out the occasional swear words. Overall, then, to this game, I would like to rate it a 9 out of 10. I have a lot of fun with this game, and I'll kind of wrap it up in a summary in my final thoughts in just a moment. But first, let's talk about strategy tips. For strategy in this game, I would say that maybe the number one thing I could advise for you is try to get your hands on some armor. You'll fight a lot in this game, and the damage reduction makes a big difference. The combat in this game calculates damage you receive based on the level of the monster, but after accounting for armor. So a level 3 monster that hits you twice will do 6 points of damage without armor, but with a level 1 armor piece, he only scores one. He will only score one hit, right, reducing that damage to only 3. And the Wasteland holds better armor than just a level 1 as well. So you can see it could be very useful in that way. The second tip that I would give you for strategy is that you want to grab those agenda cards, and don't be shy about revealing loyalty if it will help you out. Agenda cards hold the influence you need to win the game, and you can hold 4 of them at any given time. As one faction performs better than another, you can declare yourself loyal to a faction to make yourself safe against attacks by them. The same cards that allow you to do this will also multiply your influence as that faction gains power. So collecting these cards can propel you to a swift victory if you are lucky enough to get a few of them in your hand. So as I say, I really like this board game. My final thoughts that I would want to leave you with on this is that if you love the game Fallout, the video game, and you love board games, then I think you'll really enjoy the Fallout board game. I love the quest mechanics and the stories that develop as the game unfolds. I love the rich Fallout theme that shows up throughout the gameplay on every card and every tile. The Fallout board game really does deliver as a port from the video game, and I think it makes for a great video game just on its own, in its own rights, even if you don't know anything about the video game itself. So this makes a great game. I would recommend it to you. With the content restrictions and warnings that I mentioned earlier. So, do you like this kind of game? Have you played Fallout, the video game, and have you played Fallout, the board game? Do you think it makes a good port, or do you think it's lacking? What about the influence system in the Quest? Do you enjoy that? I'd like to hear from you, so please leave me comments below and let me know what you think. I'd love to know. So I'll be looking for those, and that'll wrap us up for today. So I'll see you next time on Boards and Chords. Thanks for joining us on Boards and Chords. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or at our website at boardsandchords.com. We'll see you at the table.